This project has been all about learning more about millennial perceptions of the Adirondacks, millennial regional travel behavior, and some of the key themes and trends that are going to help us develop an overarching story for the region. And as Hillary referenced, just using this unique opportunity we have to share the findings and the strategic recommendations with all the constituents throughout the region. So I am from a company called Shearson Associates, which is based in Manhattan. I live in Brooklyn. I have been working to some extent on and off with millennials for almost 20 years. When I first started, some of them weren't even born yet. It seems like a weird thing to do. I didn't exactly do it on purpose, but through various jobs, that's just been the way it's worked out. And now they're all grown up, and they're starting to disrupt real businesses in real categories. And having done so much work with millennials, I think it was a helpful relationship for us to start with the Wild Center because we didn't have to necessarily learn about millennials. We didn't have to teach ourselves about this generation in advance of starting the project. We sort of know where some of the key themes are, where some of the bodies are buried, where some of the dynamics are in terms of things like social behavior and things like that. So we could really hit the ground running, just thinking about specifically the challenges of this region and specifically the category of regional travel. Having said that, I am an outsider from New York City, but what I will say is that over the last almost year, I've been up here a lot, and Hillary mentioned there's a type of people who comes up here and just seems to love it and get it. I am one of those, and I hope to come with my kids who will love the Wild Center this coming summer. Right now I'm politicking very hard with my spouse, who previously, with whom I had plans to visit the Catskills. Boring. So we have to, we're going to try to move her along up the Adirondacks consideration ladder too. So consultants typically have 4 stage processes. It's this amazing thing about consultants, and ours included 4 phases. The first of which was immersion, which included stakeholder interviews and meetings, just meeting with a bunch of people who are active in the area in a variety of venues. We did meetings and interviews with local millennials, everybody from employees of some of the big tourist organizations to millennial farmers, people who decided to move here. Then we did qualitative research. Qualitative is a fancy word for things that aren't quantitative or statistically validatable. Qualitative research is good for when you're exploring and for when you don't necessarily need answers for what questions, but for why questions. They let you go a little deeper with a smaller number of people to actually understand some of the dynamics behind things. So we did 2 focus groups in Albany and surrounding area and 2 focus groups in New York City. We chose respondents aged 22 to 34 and split them by age into 2 separate groups. You had the younger ones in one group and the older ones in another group in each market. And then hypothesis development. Based on everything we had learned, we created sort of some key themes we knew we wanted to test, and then tested those in a survey of more than 1,000 people across the upstate and New York City regions. We didn't include all of upstate, we didn't include Western New York, but just a more realistic radius for the people we see as the near to midterm target for visiting us. This slide is just to tell you we did stuff. I'm not just a guy who has an opinion. We did lots and lots of stuff. And really what this is all in aid of is to create a new story that connects us to millennials through shared truths, through that Adirondack gene. The hypothesis is the gene exists, and those of us who are here kind of have it or know what it is. But if you're a 25-year-old New York City resident who's just beginning to travel regionally, you might have the gene, it's just latent. It hasn't been woken up yet. You don't know that it connects with this place. And so a lot of this has been to figure out how we can remain true to ourselves and also connect with what's true about millennials in ways such that we can reach them, in entirely new and better ways. So the real challenge is, what we heard again and again, is that millennials aren't coming, or the next generation of visitors, let's say, isn't coming. And we don't necessarily know why. I'm really proud of my image selection here. It's empty Adirondacks chairs. It's symbolic. They're not here. They're really brightly colored. These are the chairs that would have been for the younger ones. Sometimes when I don't know what to write, I spend too long on Google Images, and suddenly it's 2 in the morning. So What's surprising is that this is one of the most beautiful places on earth, and it's hard to imagine a lack of appeal. So what is the disconnect? Just taking a step back, understanding the generation we're talking about. This is the group that was born between 1981 and 2000. Depending on the definition that you read, there's some wiggle in those years, depending on who's talking about it. The definition that my company, we traditionally use, is 81 to 2000. There are 80 million of them in the US, 2.4 billion of them globally. That's a third of mankind now fits into this generation. And so what started as sort of a cottage industry of punditry about this generation as they started, they're kids, and now they're teenagers, and they're acting differently. It's like, now they're adults, they have jobs, they have kids. They're among us. Some of them are probably in this room. Raise your hand if you're a millennial. All right, quite a few. So giving research presentations about millennials to millennials can be somewhat nerve-wracking, because I'll say, 70% of millennials said this, and you'll say, I don't think that. Well, you're the 30%. But sometimes it's also hard to feel like you're kind of being evaluated in a fish tank. And so I apologize if there's anything here you feel like you want to push back on or challenge, or, if I had my way, violently agree with, then of course speak up. The rest of us, how many own or lease a millennial? How many have one in your home? You have the millennial model child. You are lucky. This presentation focuses on travel. There are some that I've given that focus just more on millennial beliefs and behaviors, and I have had parents come up to me afterwards and say, thank you. I understand now. It's all about Instagram. If I could just get on Instagram with my child, we could finally connect again. So 40% larger than Xers and 50% larger than Boomers. Those are global numbers. I think Boomers and Millennials are roughly the same size. I think Millennials just overtook Boomers in the past year. So that's kind of by the numbers. And how they see us. This is a word map that shows the relative size of words based on the responses Millennials gave us in our survey when we asked them what the first 5 words are that come to mind when they think about the Adirondacks. As you can see, there are some pretty straightforward answers. Mountains, camping, nature, hiking, lakes, fun, beautiful, rustic, outdoors, trees, lake, air. This has a laser pointer, and I just really want to use it once, so just want to kind of point out bears over here. And, this will be the only time I do this. So we have bears over here, and bears is actually bigger than family. So as a family travel destination, bears is more on the minds of millennials than family. But this is interesting. A lot of these are really great things. You will find the bears and the cold and the remote if you dig deeply in there. But there's plenty more beautiful and fun, plus specific awareness around activities that we do in fact commonly offer. And there's love for nature and the outdoors. So when we polled people who had been to the Adirondacks or who fit a profile of people who should go, they like the outdoors. I should just say the profile of the people that we spoke with in our survey, in quantitative research, there's something called GenPop, general population, where you just say, this is a random sampling of the entire country, and that's how they do things like presidential polls. And we did not do GenPop here. First of all, we wanted to focus on New York State, and we wanted to focus on people we thought represented a near to midterm opportunity to actually visit. That means they have access to cars, they have regionally traveled in the last year, they've done something outdoors in the last year, and they've done something cultural. So keep in mind that you're not getting this expansive nationwide view. When you see some of these stats, you're seeing the view from the standpoint of the people we think we actually have a realistic case to make for the region. So yeah, we polled people, and they like the outdoors. They want to try new things. They say they're crazy about the idea of all the outdoor activities that we have, even if they don't necessarily deliver on converting on that interest. There are a lot of idle threats when it comes to travel and outdoor stuff especially. So all of the outdoors and nature equity that we have that you can see in the previous slide, it's like, yeah, there we go. In this one, it's somewhat limited, but it's also huge equity. I mean, this is equity that we've built over decades to say, there are some things about us that are true here that are very strongly in the perception of millennials. But it's complicated. When we polled millennials statewide, less than a quarter say that they strongly believe they're an outdoors person. Around 2 out of 5 say that they travel regionally more for sporting and outdoor activities, and almost 2/3 say they travel regionally more for leisure and cultural activities. And it's interesting to note that just when you picture that mental map, mountains, lakes, streams, hiking, camping, and almost 2/3 of them are traveling more for like the leisure stuff. So even when maybe I'm bringing my Brooklyn hipster thing too much into this conversation, but it's like outdoors even means something different when people are talking about outdoors. They're interested in agriculture, urban agriculture, learning new activities, things like that. And so, I think that the focus and emphasis on things like camping, hiking, skiing, water sports, all that kind of stuff is something that is limiting the conversation right off the bat that we're having with millennials who are looking for a more diverse experience. And this just brings us to some challenges, some of which we probably already know in this room, and some of which may be new. There are distance and transportation options and challenges. There's a lack of those options, and that creates challenges, especially for areas like New York, where a lot less people actually own cars. A lot of them zip car and rent cars and things like that, but it's a further distance and transportation stuff. A lot of millennials from New York, at least, travel by bus. They take buses to places like Boston and Cape Cod, New York City. They get on the bus. There are places in Lower Manhattan, and they're like, when they started, it was like $13 to Boston or something. Like just these crazy bus rides that are really popular with millennials. What we found is that there's a lot of sense that they don't actually know where to start planning a trip with us. This is a region that offers so much, is geographically roughly the size of Massachusetts, and it's something that's a little hard. It's almost like, I want to get into it, but how do I get into it? It's like there's no instruction manual, there's no single place to go, which surprised me because I've perused the supporting websites and the official tourism website, and a lot of the information millennials seem to be asking for is on there, but yet they're still not connecting somehow with this idea of knowing where to start. One of the things that came as a little bit of a surprise to me, and I don't think we were totally expecting, was the sheer amount of social pressure travel planners feel in choosing a location, and how the Adirondacks as a region presents a unique set of challenges to those people who are feeling that pressure and who want to make the right decision. And we'll talk more about that in a little while. And there are awareness issues. While almost everybody has heard of the Adirondacks, there's a general lack of awareness of everything the region has to offer. When we did our focus groups, we talked to a bunch of millennials, many of whom had been here, and after a segment of the focus group where we talked about this hypothetical place that had all of these activities, which by the way are the ones that we have, we asked them to guess where that was, and they couldn't, even the ones who had been here. So there's just a lack of awareness, even among the people who have been here, about everything that the region has to offer. They're seeking variety. This might not come as a huge surprise. We heard firsthand in the focus groups that outdoor activities only work when there's other stuff to do. And the further away travelers come from, the more they expect to do, the longer they expect to stay. They don't want to stay for a long time and just do one activity. Mountains, camping, and hiking aren't enough in this case for these particular people. So as we expand our, as we think about people further away as a strategy for growth, it's important to think about the ability to create experiences that are, robust enough to stand up to a 4 or 5 or 6 day visit, because if people come from that far, that's how long they want to stay. And so what I think we've identified the real challenge as here, and this is sort of the intro, we're going to go into a lot more depth about some of these topics. But the real challenge here is that we are a region positioned either intentionally or not as nature and outdoors and sporting and things like that. And we have broad awareness and association with nature and outdoors. We have an audience that wants to try a lot of the things we have to offer, but we're missing some central facts, or at least we were. Most don't consider them outdoor people. If they do, their definition of outdoor might be different. Most consider leisure activities, things like exploring towns, shopping, just wandering, things like that, as more important than outdoor activities to them. And in the end, we offer a place to travel, and millennials want experiences. And there's a difference, and what that means to us is another part of what we'll get into today. But to skip to the punchline, it may very well be that we're not competing on outdoors. We're not competing for share of regional travel. We're competing for share of experiences, which is a competitive economy that millennials exist in for a number of reasons. And that may affect how we need to tell our story to millennials in a way that they're going to listen to and understand.